Will Smith, the amazing star of Hollywood blockbusters, the fearless hero who saved the world in Independence Day, the immortal guardian who stood against the unknown in Men in Black, and the broken father who made the entire world cry in the pursuit of happiness. With unmatched charm, explosive energy, and acting talent that could make people laugh out loud and cry their hearts out, he became one of the most beloved and powerful legends ever to appear on the big screen. For decades, he ruled over movies like an unshakable giant, the living crown of Hollywood, the very symbol of greatness and a timeless source of inspiration for millions across the globe. From humble beginnings as a young rapper fighting to escape the streets of West Philadelphia, he carved his name into history as a global icon, admired, respected, and celebrated as a shining example of rising from hardship. But behind that dazzling legacy lies a story not glamorous, but brutal. A battlefield of betrayal, of painful regret, of tragedies so deep that even the brightest spotlight could never protect him. The world saw only his bright smile for so many years, but few ever felt the heavy weight pressing down on his heart, the dark secrets, the deep wounds that refused to let go. This is a life overflowing with winds, yet marked by storms and loss. A life that makes us ask, can the brightest light of Hollywood survive its own shadow? It's heartbreaking when the rise of a legend is not born in glory, but in the echo of anger, louder than any applause, the sound of love breaking under the weight of fear. That was the beginning of Willard Carroll Smith Jr., born on September 25, 1968 in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. He entered the world as the second of 4 children, growing up with his older sister, Pamela, and his younger twin siblings, Harry and Ellen. At home, his father, Willard Smith Sr., was a refrigeration engineer, the smell of oil and machinery following him through the door each night, while his mother, Caroline Bright, was a devoted school administrator who carried chalk dust on her fingertips and quiet determination in her voice. On paper, theirs was a middle-class household in the Winfield neighborhood, a family that looked safe, steady, and promising. But appearances can lie. Inside those walls, storms raged that no child could ever escape. Will's father was a man of order and fire, feared as much as he was respected. His mother was soft-spoken but unbreakable, a believer in discipline through learning, not through fists. Their marriage was a fault line, tense and waiting to break. And when it broke, it shattered a child's world. At just 9 years old, Will stood frozen. A shout, a blow, a mother falling down, a boy paralyzed by terror. He later confessed in his memoir that this was the moment that branded his soul with shame. I always thought of myself as a coward because I saw my father hit my mother and I didn't do anything. That night was not only fear, it was betrayal. The man he looked up to became the man who broke his heart. The child who loved his father now carried the weight of disappointment, guilt, and silence. That wound would bleed quietly through decades of triumph, shaping the man the world adored but never truly understood. The Smith household was not poor. His neighborhood was considered safe, even privileged compared to the harsher corners of Philadelphia. But safety is not measured in money, and comfort cannot erase terror. Not poor, but never safe. That was the truth of his childhood. Night after night, Will turn to the glow of television and the rhythm of hip-hop to drown out the aftershocks of silence. He discovered a shield, humor. If he could make his family laugh, maybe the walls would stop shaking. Survival became performance. Performance became identity. The smile that would one day light up the world was born here, not as joy, but as a mask to hide the scared boy who lived inside. As the years passed, the cracks became impossible to bridge. His parents separated during his teenage years, and when their divorce was finalized in 2000, Will was already a superstar. He lived with his mother, Caroline, who never remarried. She remained his steady anchor, the one who quietly held him up as the storms of fame and memory raged on. But even her strength could not erase the scars. Decades later, he admitted, "Everything I've built, everything I've done comes from trying to protect my mother." Behind every box office triumph stood the same 9-year-old boy, still trying to rewrite the night that broke him. Childhood for Will Smith was not painted in innocence. It was carved in scars. It is tragic when glory arrives hand in hand with embarrassment. When the first taste of triumph tastes as bitter as failure itself. That was the beginning of Will Smith's career. A rise so dazzling yet pierced with wounds he could never forget. In the mid-1980s, still just a teenager with boundless energy and a grin too bright to ignore, he joined forces with his childhood friend Jeffrey Towns, better known as DJ Jazzy Jeff. Together, they became DJ Jazzy Jeff and the Fresh Prince, a duo that lit up the hip-hop scene with playful, family-friendly rap. Their songs carried laughter instead of anger, joy instead of rage. Audiences loved it. Parents approved. For the first time, rap echoed not only on city blocks, but in suburban living rooms. At just 20 years old, Will Smith was living a dream. Yet beneath the cheers lay whispers that cut deeper than silence. Hardcore rappers sneered, calling him soft. Critics dismissed his music as too commercial. The streets turned their backs, and the sting grew unbearable in 1989 when Will and Jeff won the first ever Grammy Award for Best Rap Performance for their hit Parents Just Don't Understand. It should have been his crowning moment, history carved in gold. But that same night, some of rap's most respected names boycotted the ceremony, angry that the Recording Academy refused to show their category on TV. So there he stood, holding history in his hands, smiling before the world. While in his heart the room was silent, the respect absent. Triumph had come, but wrapped in the choking cloak of rejection. Success brought money, and money became temptation. At just 20 years old, Will Smith had more wealth than he could count. Cars shining in the driveway, jewelry flashing under the lights, parties that seemed endless. The roar of fame was intoxicating, drowning out the whisper of responsibility. He was too young, too unprepared to realize that money without discipline is a trap. And then came the reminder that never forgets, the IRS. By the early 1990s, barely 21, the dream collapsed. Millions of dollars in back taxes choked him. Cars gone, fortune gone, IRS at the door. The boy who had just made history with a Grammy in his hands was suddenly broke. I had a hit record, a Grammy, he would later confess. And then suddenly I was broke. Completely broke. The fall was brutal. One year, he was a star the world loved. The next, he was a warning tale whispered in the industry. That collapse taught his first true lesson. Success means nothing without control. Talent can open doors, but without discipline, those doors slam shut. Fame had promised paradise, but instead it delivered humiliation and sleepless nights. And then destiny knocked. In 1990, at the very edge of collapse, Will received an invitation from the legendary Quincy Jones. At a party buzzing with stars, Quincy looked him straight in the eye and demanded an audition for a sitcom role right there in the living room. Will froze. He wasn't ready. No script, no rehearsal. But Quincy pushed, do it now. Take the chance or it's gone. And so with nothing but raw instinct and desperation, Will performed on the spot. The living room became a stage. The silence became a spotlight. And in those few minutes, his charm lit the room like lightning. Destiny chose him. The role was his. Overnight, he transformed from a broke rapper to the face of a new cultural phenomenon, the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. It was more than a second chance. It was resurrection. From the ashes of rejection, from the ruins of debt and shame, rose a new star. Not only a Prince of Bel-Air, but a Prince of Destiny itself. Hollywood placed its brightest crown on his head. But what glittered in the spotlight often cut like a blade in the dark. Will Smith wore that crown, dazzling millions. Yet every jewel carried a hidden weight. From the laughter of the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air to the roaring thunder of blockbuster cinema, he rose as a king of the box office in the 1990s. Bad Boys lit the fuse. Independence Day made him the savior of the world. And Men in Black stamped his face in a global pop culture. To millions, he was unstoppable, charming, fearless, the man who could save humanity with a smile. But behind that smile, storms raged, and the climb to glory came with shadows no one else could see. Fame gave him power, but it also built a cage around him. The world demanded a perfect hero, always witty, always bright, never broken. Critics dismissed him as too polished, too fake, as though being real and joyful were flaws. I felt like no matter what I did, he later admitted, people only saw the image, not the person. For a star who gave the world so much, invisibility was the cruelest punishment of all. Seeking to prove himself will turn to depth, stepping away from crowd-pleasing blockbusters to become Muhammad Ali in Ali 2001. The transformation did not just challenge him, it nearly broke him. To play a man larger than life meant carrying not only Ali's gloves, but his fire, his scars, and the weight of history itself. Will pushed his body to the edge. Endless hours in the gym until his muscles screamed. Fighting until bruises painted his ribs. Training his voice until it cracked. Sleep was rare. Exhaustion constant. His days consumed by a cycle of sweat, pain, and relentless repetition. Every punch was not just choreography. It was agony. Every line practiced under the harsh gaze of critics, and fans felt like standing trial. Every day became a war against his own body, his own doubt. The performance earned him an Academy Award nomination, but it left him hollowed, scarred by the cost of proving he was worthy to channel another man's greatness. The applause was thunderous, but only Will knew the cost. The nights of pain, the fear that he might never escape the shadow of Ali. Then came the pursuit of happiness in 2006. This was no ordinary role. It was remembrance. As he played Chris Gardner, a father crushed by poverty, yet fighting for his child, was not just acting. He was reopening old wounds. Every desperate glance, every shaking plea was rooted in a promise made by a 9-year-old boy who once froze as his mother was struck. On screen, the promise returned. His children would never go through what he had gone through. The tears that streamed down his face were not performance. They were memory. They were scars that had waited decades to be released. The film earned him another Oscar nomination and the respect of critics. But more importantly, it brought him a kind of healing no award could match. For Will Smith, cinema had become more than art. It was survival, a way to bleed his pain into light. Then redemption arrived with King Richard 2021, giving him a role that was not just a character, but a mirror. As Richard Williams, the flawed yet relentless father of Venus and Serena, Will found a reflection of his own journey. Imperfect, fiercely protective, desperate to shield his family from storms. Every scene was both performance and confession. When he finally won the Academy Award for Best Actor in 2022, it was more than Hollywood's applause. It was vindication. After decades of laughter, action, triumph, and doubt, the boy who once hid fear behind jokes stood tall as a man whose soul commanded the stage. For that night, the crown was his. The world did not just see the star. They saw the man, the father, the soul, the legend. But on March 27th, 2022, Will Smith finally reached the summit he had chased for more than 3 decades. The ovation thundered like a storm, shaking the walls. Waves of applause crashing over him as if the world itself bowed in recognition. But the higher the crown, the sharper its edge. In the very same hall, under the very same lights, the triumph that should have sealed his legacy instead delivered its cruelest wound. The spotlight that had crowned him turned scorching. It happened in seconds. A joke about Jada Pinkett Smith cut through the air. Will rose from his seat, his face tight with fury, and walked toward the stage. And then, in front of millions watching live, his hand struck Chris Rock across the face. The sound cracked through the Dolby Theater, louder, sharper, more shocking than any applause. Gasps erupted, eyes widened, and within moments, silence swallowed the room. In that instant, the miracle of victory collapsed into the weight of infamy. What had been the night of his crowning glory became the night of his most brutal trial. The fall was not gradual, not merciful. It was sudden, devastating, and witnessed by the entire world. The cost was devastating. The Academy banned him from attending the Oscars or any Academy events for 10 years. He resigned from the Academy altogether. Films already in motion were stopped. Studios retreating into silence. The career that once seemed unshakable now shook like glass. In mere seconds, decades of respect were overshadowed. A lifetime of honor was clouded by a single loss of control. Seconds of impulse had stolen years of legacy. And then came the silence. Not the gentle silence of rest, but the choking kind that follows an earthquake. After the lights dimmed and the cheers evaporated, Will stood alone in the shadow of his own actions. He later confessed, it was a scar for life. The world had seen the act. Only he endured its echo. Days blurred into nights, haunted by replay, by the sound that would not stop echoing in his mind. Sleep became a stranger. Questions ate at him endlessly. Why did I not stop? How could I have let it happen? He carried not just the shame of the strike, but the deeper agony of knowing he had hurt more than one person. His friend, his peers, his fans, and himself. Yet he did not hide. He stood before the world not as the Fresh Prince or the box office king, but as a man stripped bare. Time and again he spoke. Public statements, tearful reflections, confessions that trembled with regret. I was wrong, he said. I hurt people and I regret it deeply. His voice carried no swagger, only the fragility of someone carrying shame heavier than any trophy. The apologies could not rewrite the moment, but they revealed a man willing to confront it, to bear the pain instead of deny it. This was not the Will Smith audiences thought they knew. To understand the man who shattered under the spotlight, we must rewind to the early 1990s. In 1992, at the very height of his rise on the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, Will seemed to step into a season where life offered him not only fame, but fulfillment. He met actress Sherry Zampino. Their whirlwind romance moved quickly. That same year, they exchanged vows, and for the first time in his life, Will believed he had secured not just an audience, but a home. Later that year came the moment that forever marked him, a father for the first time. When their son Trey was born, Will held him with shaking hands and a heart overflowing. To Will, that tiny hand wrapping around his finger was not only life, it was redemption. In Trey's first cry, he heard the silencing of his own childhood fears. For a while, it seemed as though he had found the balance he had always longed for. But the spotlight is a jealous companion. The long nights on set, the endless travel, all of it pressed down on a marriage still fragile and new. By 1995, only 3 years after they had promised forever, the promises unraveled. The divorce was not just paperwork. It was the collapse of a dream Will had sworn as a boy to protect. He would later admit with searing honesty, divorce was the ultimate failure for me. The deepest wound was not the broken marriage. It was the growing distance with his son Trey. Time offered him a second chance. Slowly, painfully, Will began to rebuild what had been lost. Father and son did not reconcile under the glare of cameras, but in the quiet strength of love restored. In 1997, 5 years after the collapse of his first marriage, Will believed he had found destiny itself. That year, he married actress Jada Pinkett, a woman of fierce independence, raw talent, and magnetic presence. Together they rose as one of Hollywood's most admired couples. Within just a few years, their family grew. Jaden was born in 1998. Willow followed in 2000. To the world, they were royalty. For Will, Jada was more than a partner. She was a force. Their love seemed to prove that even beneath Hollywood's brightest spotlight, family could bloom and love could last. But no Hollywood love story is free of shadows. Over time, private friction met public noise. Rumors of an open marriage and questions about boundaries emerged. In 2020, Jada publicly described what she called an entanglement, a romantic relationship during a period when she and Will were separated. Behind the curtain, the truth was heavier still. Since 2016, they had lived apart, married yet separated, bound yet broken. And yet through every storm, a bond remained. Will has called Jada his life partner. They never disguised their fractures. Instead, they let the world see them raw, imperfect, human. Now, at 56 years old, Will Smith no longer lives in the glare of constant headlines. He resides in a sprawling compound in Calabasas, Financially, his fortune is estimated at between $350 and $400 million. In 2022, he returned with Emancipation. 2 years later, he roared back with Bad Boys 4, crossing $400 million worldwide. By 2025, he returned to music after 2 decades. Among its tracks, one stood out, Beautiful Scars. His return is quieter, stitched together by endurance and perseverance. Greatness is not the absence of scars, but the grace to live with them and let them teach us how to endure.